Hello, everyone. We trust that you had a very good weekend, and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, and we're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. The U.S. dollar slips again against the yen and hovers near a four-year low against the euro as market optimism over the U.S. trade deals fuels bets on early Federal Reserve rate cuts. France, Germany, and the UK condemn threats against the head of the UN nuclear watchdog, Rafael Grossi, after Iran rejects his request to visit the nuclear sites bombed by both Israel and the United States. Switzerland says a cyber attack on the nonprofit health foundation Radix, which involved data being stolen and encrypted, has also affected the federal administration, which is one of the foundation's customers. Singapore ramps up crypto exchange regulations in a bid to curb money laundering and boost market confidence after a series of high-profile scandals rattled the sector. And a punishing heat wave gripped southern Europe, including Italy, Portugal, and Spain, prompting authorities to issue health and wildfire warnings as temperatures are expected to soar. We begin in the Middle East, where a religious decree from Iran has escalated already high tensions in the region, placing two world leaders at the center of a global Islamic call to action. In the latest, one of Iran's top Shiite clerics has issued a fatwa, which is a religious ruling against President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The decree labels the two leaders as enemies of God and warlords. Under Iran's Sharia-based legal system, those declared enemies of God can face the most severe punishments that include amputation, exile, crucifixion, and even execution. Now, the religious decree came in response to what the cleric called threats made against Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, by President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Because during a recent 12-day conflict between Iran and Israel, both leaders had reportedly hinted at the possibility of targeting Khamenei directly.
We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He is an easy target, but is safe there. We are not going to take him out, at least not for now. But we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. Our patience is wearing thin. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
People ask me, are we targeting the downfall of the regime? That may be a result, but it's up to the Iranian people to rise for their freedom. Freedom is never cheap. It's never free. Freedom requires these subjugated people to rise up, and it's up to them. But we may create conditions that will help them do it.
This sharp religious ruling has sent a clear message to Muslims worldwide. The cleric's decree called on all Muslims, individuals, and Islamic states alike to unite and resist any support or cooperation with President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu, or their governments. He declared such alliances as religiously forbidden and also promised divine rewards to any Muslim who suffers hardship or loss while acting on the religious duty, describing them as fighters in the way of God. Now, fatwas are not new in Iran's political religious playbook, and though not legally binding outside Iran, they carry enormous weight across the Shia Muslim world. The most infamous example was in 1989 when Iran's then supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei issued a fatwa against British Indian author Salman Rushdie over his book, The Satanic Verses. That decree led to decades of threats, a translator's murder, and a brutal stabbing attack in 2023 that left Rushdie blind in one eye. So as the dust settles from the recent conflict, this fatwa could ignite another kind of war, one not fought with bombs or missiles, but with beliefs, loyalties, and a call to global action. And that may only be the beginning. Continuing in the Middle East, where questions over Iran's nuclear ambitions remain more urgent than ever, despite President Donald Trump's repeated claims that the recent U.S. strikes have completely and totally obliterated Tehran's nuclear program. new assessments suggest the damage may be far less permanent. Rafael Grossi, the head of the UN's nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, has directly contradicted President Trump's bold assertions. Speaking to CBS News, Grossi revealed that Iran still possesses the technological and industrial capabilities to restart uranium enrichment and could do so in a matter of months.
Capacities they have are there. They can have, in a matter of months, I would say a few cascades of centrifuges spinning and producing enriched uranium, or less than that.
Although Grossi acknowledged that Iran's ability to convert and enrich uranium has been significantly set back, he still cautioned that the core problem remains and that it is Iran's technical expertise is still very much intact.
Iran is a very sophisticated country in terms of nuclear technology, so you cannot disinvent this. You cannot undo the knowledge that you have or the capacities that you have.
Now, the U.S. airstrikes, which were part of a joint operation with Israel known as Operation Midnight Hammer, targeted Iran's three key nuclear sites in Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. The strikes followed a 12-day war between Iran and Israel, which aimed at halting Tehran's suspected pathway to a nuclear weapon. Time and again, Iran has denied those intentions, maintaining that its nuclear program is solely for peaceful purposes.
For us Iranians, the U.S. action in targeting Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities, all of which were under the NPT framework, the agreements of the NPT, and under full and continuous supervision by the International Atomic Energy Agency, is an entirely illegal and criminal act. Therefore, when someone accuses Iran of seeking weapons of mass destruction or pursuing nuclear armament, it is an extremely serious accusation against a country that has itself been a victim of such weapons.
And now, in a further revealing detail, Grossi also said that the IAEA had previously discovered uranium traces in undeclared locations across Iran, and that Tehran had consistently failed to provide credible answers about those findings.
What I was concerned about is that there were other things that were not clear. For example, we had found traces of uranium in some places in Iran, which were not the normal declared facilities. And we were asking for years, why did we find these traces of enriched uranium in place X, Y, or Z? And we were simply not getting credible answers.
The Trump administration, meanwhile, has downplayed Grossi's latest remarks. In fact, a U.S. official pointed to his earlier statement where he described a very serious level of damage to the facilities and emphasized that Iran's weak air defenses make it unlikely they could easily restart a nuclear program. On the ground, however, Iran's actions have sparked concern. Its parliament recently passed a bill halting cooperation with the IAEA, and officials have also hinted at reconsidering their membership in the Non-Proliferation Treaty, raising alarm bells globally. And now, since the suspension, the IAEA has been denied access to inspect the damaged facilities. Iran's foreign minister accused the agency of bias and rejected Grossi's request for entry, calling it possibly even malign in intent. While Iran and Israel have agreed to a ceasefire for now, tensions remain very high. As Iran's armed forces chief warned, they are in fact prepared to retaliate if provoked once again. The question now is, what happens if Iran chooses to restart enrichment tomorrow? And here in Washington, despite an ongoing feud with billionaire CEO Elon Musk, President Donald Trump has praised the Tesla CEO, calling him a wonderful guy. In an interview that aired on Sunday, the president said Elon Musk, who was most recently part of the president's administration, was smart and always going to do well. But he further says the billionaire's recent behavior was not appropriate.
I think he's a wonderful guy. I haven't spoken to him much, but I think Elon is a wonderful guy, and I know he's going to do well always. He's a smart guy, and he actually went and campaigned with me and this and that, but he got a little bit upset, and that wasn't appropriate.
President Trump explained that the rift started over his decision to repeal electric vehicle mandates, saying he doesn't want to force Americans to buy electric cars.
Look, the electric vehicle mandate, the EV mandate, is a tough thing for him. I don't want everybody to have an electric car.
But just hours before that interview aired, Elon Musk once again took aim at President Trump's sweeping tax and spending bill as the latest Senate draft was unveiled. On his social media platform X, he called the big beautiful bill, quote, unquote, utterly insane and destructive, and warned it would destroy jobs and cut funding for clean energy projects.
The latest Senate draft bill will destroy millions of jobs in America and cause immense strategic harm to our country. It gives handouts to industries of the past while severely damaging industries of the future.
This latest outburst followed weeks of escalating tensions, with Musk earlier describing the bill as a disgusting abomination and posting a Kill Bill meme urging lawmakers to reject the plan. At one point, the billionaire posted and later deleted an allegation linking the president to the Epstein files. President Trump initially held back from criticizing Musk, but seeing his signature legislation hanging in the balance as a result of constant attacks by the former head of DOGE, he eventually said he was very disappointed in the billionaire CEO. The rift between the two powerful men raised concerns for Musk's broader business empire, including Starlink, SpaceX, and Tesla, all of which rely heavily on federal contracts and regulatory approvals. The president had threatened to terminate Elon Musk's federal contracts and subsidies, but behind the scenes, reports say Vice President J.D. Vance, Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, and crypto czar David Sachs tried to diffuse tensions earlier this month. Elon Musk eventually issued a public statement saying he'd gone too far in his post about the president. He deleted several messages, including the one which suggested the president be impeached, but he did not scale back his criticism of the bill, which extends the 2017 tax cuts, severely cuts social safety net programs, and boost spending on military and border security. And in the aftermath of the rift, Musk reportedly voiced support for the president's immigration policy and mostly reined in his political posts on social media. But his restraint didn't last, especially as Saturday's legislative debate over the Republican mega bill neared a vote. However, the president's Senate allies have dismissed the calls to kill the bill. And the Republican-controlled U.S. Senate narrowly advanced a sweeping tax cut and spending bill on Saturday night.
President, we have before us today a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver legislation to create a safer, stronger, and more prosperous America. With one bill, we can deliver on a number of priorities: tax relief for hardworking Americans, economic growth, a stronger national defense, a more secure border, a more reliable energy supply.
So with the bill moving closer to becoming law and Elon Musk continuing to publicly challenge the president's agenda, the feud between these two powerful figures now appears to be entering a new and even more uncertain phase. Serbia is on edge. Roads blocked, bridges seized, ruling party offices under attack, and thousands demanding change and snap elections. What began as a peaceful protest has now turned into a major political crisis. The people want early elections, and President Aleksandar Vučić is accusing them of causing terror. Dozens of people have been arrested, and tensions are soaring as the protests spread to smaller cities. So what's really happening in Serbia, and what has triggered this unrest? Here's more from the scene.
With Serbian flags in their hands, tens of thousands of people gathered in the heart of capital Belgrade. They held 16 minutes of silence for the 16 lives lost in the 2024 Novi Sad tragedy, which unleashed a relentless wave of anti-corruption protests across Serbia. Around 140,000 people had gathered. These protesters were singing, they were dancing and chanting slogans.
Today we are here to change Serbia. To change Serbia and to finally see an end to this government. To somehow, I don't know how, to get to those elections, to call them. And yes, I hope that they will be as fair as possible, because there will never be completely fair ones. And then we will start another fight, only not on the streets, but at the polling stations.
Well, the hope is that something will change, that after 30 years we will be able to truly live in the society we have been fighting for since the 90s. At least that is why I am here.
But soon it took a violent turn. Streets of Belgrade witnessed havoc as clashes erupted between protesters and the riot police deployed. As the police shields went up, the anger among the crowd surged. Riot officers used tear gas and batons to attempt to disperse a crowd that also threw bottles, garbage cans, flares and fireworks. At least 38 people were taken into custody in Belgrade and 77 others arrested on accusations including planning to block roads and attack state institutions. Local media in Novi Sad posted videos that showed large crowds streaming into major bridges, students forming barriers using bins and fences. The demonstrators have been calling for snap elections. They want President Alexander Vučić to go.
What is happening is that we will not give up. We want to topple Vučić. Anybody else can come in.
For weeks now, protests have been sprouting across the country, with bridges blocked, roads barricaded, tents in city squares, and violence. But President Vučić continues to remain defiant. He accused the student-led movement of causing terror and said there would be no negotiations with terrorists and those who want to destroy the state. There will be many more arrested for attacking the police. This is not the end, he said.
We must reach out to all those who think differently, talk to them, open a dialogue. There are no negotiations with terrorists and those who wanted to destroy the state. Responsibility will follow in every sphere and every domain of social life. But for those who have different political ideas, for those who are not satisfied with the level of democracy, for those who think that we have done something wrong somewhere, who think that we are doing something wrong, we are always willing to talk to them, and we will have to do so. Revenge must not be our language, but responsibility must be part of our future.
The outcry over the Novi Sad disaster has already led to the resignation of the Serbian Prime Minister and a cabinet reshuffle. The Serbian president claims these protesters are a foreign ploy to destroy his government. People in Serbia say it's not about politics, but trust. They say with the collapse of the roof of the Novi Sad station, the trust in the government collapsed as well. Moreover, the protesters also accuse President Vučić of silencing critics and allowing corruption to thrive. They also accuse him of turning Serbia into an authoritarian state, allowing organized crime to flourish. President Vučić denies it all, but the cracks in his rule are becoming harder to ignore. Months of protests across the country, university showdowns have rattled Vučić, whose second term will end in 2027. The president has previously too refused snap elections. His Progressive Party-led coalition holds 156 of 250 parliamentary seats. He has also maintained close ties to Russia. Serbia, a candidate of EU membership, has not joined Western sanctions imposed on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. But are arrests and accusations enough to silence the crowd? Or is Serbia heading towards a political showdown?
And finally, when you think of Paris Fashion Week, you usually think of glamour, celebrities, and bold style statements. But last week, one particular runway show made headlines for a very different reason. Not for its fabrics or designs, but for the political controversy it sparked. At the center of it, Mexican-American designer Willie Chavarria, and a collection that many say resembled the uniforms worn inside El Salvador's mega prison. This prompted a sharp reaction from President Nayib Bukele himself. Here's how fashion show turned into a diplomatic flashpoint.
Fashion shows are usually about style, glamour, and celebrity appeal. But a recent Paris runway has sparked a diplomatic controversy with El Salvador. Reason? A collection that referenced prison uniforms and triggered a sharp reaction from President Nayib Bukele himself. At Paris Fashion Week on Friday, Mexican-American designer Willy Chavarria presented a runway show where models walked in oversized white t-shirts and shorts. Models kneeled on the runway, bowed their shaved heads, and kept their hands behind their backs. The look closely resembled the uniforms worn by inmates at El Salvador's controversial mega prison, the Terrorism Confinement Center, or CCOT, built to hold up to 40,000 gang members and criminal suspects. Chavarria's brand said the display was meant to highlight the dehumanization of migrants and prisoners. It was also a response to the Trump administration's recent immigration raids and a commentary on detention conditions in the U.S. and abroad.
The opening piece was to contrast against the beauty of the people that are actually being kidnapped and shipped away, broken away from their families. The chaos that we're seeing right now.
But the display didn't sit well with President Bukele. On X, he mocked the show, writing that El Salvador was to ship inmates to Paris if given the green light from the French government. His press office followed up, saying the comment demonstrated his firm stance against attempts to glorify criminality.
I want to be able to go outside right now and to be able to enjoy life. But
Bukele then posted a footage of a woman crying after an incident in Paris with the caption, quote, "This is the result of glorifying criminals in Paris," unquote.
I want to see, but I'm actually terrified.
Billionaire CEO Elon Musk later shared Bukele's post, further amplifying the controversy. The act has also reignited global focus on CCOT itself. Since its opening in 2023, the maximum security prison has been at the center of international attention. Bukele built CCOT to house members of notorious gangs like MS-13 and Barrio 18. Also held there are 252 Venezuelans deported from the US, accused of belonging to the Tren de Aragua gang. The Trump administration has reportedly paid Bukele's government millions of dollars to imprison migrants it classifies as gang members or terrorists.
Well, it's an honor to be here.
Human rights groups say conditions inside CCOT are extreme, with cells lacking windows, no mattresses, and no family visits. Since 2022, over 85,000 people have been detained under Bukele's state of emergency, a crackdown he calls necessary for public safety. But critics continue to raise concerns over due process and human rights violations. And now that debate has spilled onto an unlikely platform, the Paris Fashion Week runway. With no comment yet from French officials or Fashion Week organizers, the debate continues on the intersection of style, politics, and human rights.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank all of you for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.